Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's RSSE Africa Meetup. We're so glad you can make it. Before we begin, we'll start with some housekeeping, just to keep things a bit organized. As usual, we have our shared Google Drive, Google document, which I am going to share on the chat section. So we have our shared Google Doc, and on the Google Doc, we have our code of conduct, which is just basically a reminder to say we are to treat each other with respect and kindness at all times. And you will see on the Google Doc as well, we have the schedule for the day. And you can also read about Simon, our speaker for today. And we also use the shared Google Doc to make notes, to share resources, and to ask questions while the presentation is going on. And very importantly, please introduce yourself. Give us your name, your country, your affiliation. Let us know that you are here, because this is a platform that encourages networking, collaboration, and of course, we want to grow the RSSE Africa community. Please make sure to follow RSSE Africa on Twitter and to join the forum. The details for connection are also on the document. So now that the admin is out of the way, I'm going to introduce today's speaker. So joining us today, we have Simon Hettrick. He is the Deputy Director of the Software Sustainability Institute. Simon is a passionate advocate for research software engineers and works with stakeholders from across the research community to develop policies that support RSE. I think Simon does have a bit on his slide about introduction, and I'll just allow him to introduce himself.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction, Noma. So I was asked to talk about what skills RSEs want to learn. And I've been doing a lot of work in this area over the last sort of 12 years. And we most recently had the International RSE survey go out, and the results have come in from that. They'll be published and available from tomorrow, so you can have a look through not just the skills requirements, but everything from the background, where people are based, which languages they speak, how happy they are in their job, right through to EDI characteristics like gender and age group and salary levels even. So it's a really in-depth survey with lots of information in it, and you'll have access to that tomorrow. But today I'm looking at just the skills. So I actually know quite a lot of you, so I think I might go a bit quickly through this next bit, but I thought I better sort of do an introduction to sort of who I am and why I'm interested in RSE skills. So as Noma said, I'm the Deputy Director of the Software Sustainability Institute. We were set up in 2010, and we're the first organization in the world to be set up to investigate how software is used in research. When we were set up, people were aware that software was quite important, but thanks to our work and the work of now a lot of organizations that have joined us, we've seen that the software is basically the underpinning technology over the vast majority of research, if not all research. The problem is that it was being dealt with as a sort of disposable tool, something that produced results that would end up in a publication, and that meant that software wasn't getting the effort and resources that were necessary to ensure that it was reliable and reproducible. And since it's the underpinning tool, if you don't have reliable and reproducible software, you don't have reliable and reproducible research, and none of us want that. We've worked over a lot of different areas, but my introduction to RSE came when I was chairing the workshop where the term was first coined. That was back in 2012. So as you'll notice, we're 10 years old this year. In March this year, RSE was 10. And I got talking to the people who were interested in creating this new role and about why it was created. And it was created because basically there was a lot of people developing software and research, but there wasn't a career path for them. What that meant was that people were getting trapped in very short-term careers. They weren't getting the career progression they needed. They weren't getting the recognition they deserved for their contribution to research. And that means, again, it was another factor that meant that software was being overlooked. So when I first took over policy at the Institute, I was looking for a campaign to run, and I wanted to run something that was going to be impactful, that would convert a lot of people to the cause of software sustainability, but also would be very, very cheap because we didn't have any money. And so I chose research software engineering and kicked off with the first workshop for RSEs, which took place in 2013. We got 56 people together who said they wanted to be recognized by this term. We talked about various things. And the most important thing that came out of that workshop was that we created the UK RSE Association, which was the first national association for RSEs. So we created the UK RSE Association. There were 6 of us at first. I was the founding chair, and over time, it's been phenomenally successful. So 2013, there were 6 people. In 2022, there are around about 10,000 RSEs around the world. There are 9 national associations, including RSSE Africa, which is, I think, the most recent group to join the fold. I'm really happy to see that the work that you're doing here, trying to bring together RSE, even though it's got an extra S, which I keep overlooking, RSSE in Africa. And when I was on the international panel with Kim, who's joined us just last week, and we were talking about the kind of ways that national associations should work together to support each other. So we really want anything we can do to help. Please just let us know. We're really keen to bring you into the fold. So we have this situation now where we've got lots of RSEs all around the world, and I can't go on to this bit without saying that we had the RSE conference last year, the first last week. First in-person conference we've had since 2019. It was absolutely fantastic to see everybody in the flesh again. The online conferences were great, but it was nothing compared to meeting up with everybody. You can see a photo here of 360 of us together in Newcastle. There will be another conference next year, again in September, and we would love to see some people from RSSE Africa there. So please let us know if you'd like to join us. Right, so that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of my role in RSE. And I might have made it sound a bit too positive. You know, you're sort of now possibly thinking sort of what problems are left. Well, it's true that we've made a huge amount of progress in the last 10 years, but there are still a number of different problems that I think are the main problems for our community. We've done great work getting recognition for RSE, especially at governmental level and at funder level in the UK. And we also get fantastic recognition at the researcher level, the people who are working with the RSEs. But the thing that we're missing is kind of like that middle management recognition. And that might sound like a fairly boring group of people to get recognized by, but they're the ones who, you know, they're the ones who run the accounts, they're the ones who run the HR, they're the people who really have a role in dictating who is employed and how those people are employed. It's a very important group that we need to convince. So that's certainly one of the big problems that lies ahead of us. We've had brilliant success again in getting recognition for RSEs who work within RSE groups, and we're seeing career progression. We're seeing people recognized for the work they do rather than the work of a postdoc or some other job family they've been recruited into. But we're not seeing the same benefits for RSEs who are embedded into research groups. So we really need to make sure that the RSEs embedded into research groups get the same kind of career benefits that people in RSE groups are getting. And I think the route there is to work on improving recognition for software as a valid research output from research. So rather than just being seen as this disposable tool to generate a result, which then ends up in the publication, and the publication is the thing that you want, we need to see people getting recognition for developing and engineering reliable, reproducible software. If you're interested in that field, then I suggest you have a look at some of my work with the Hidden Ref, which is an attempt to try and change the academic culture in the UK about what is important to research. I don't have time to talk about that in this presentation, but please do take a look. So those are sort of 3 of the main problems, but one of the other ones is kind of that we've been a bit of a victim of our own success, and that is we're running out of RSEs. So all of the groups, and there are 32 universities with RSE groups in the UK, are growing rapidly. The biggest are around about 48 RSEs. And we're seeing lots of embedded RSE groups taking off as well, and lots of new positions embedded into research groups. And it means that we just simply don't have enough research software engineers. We need to create more of them, but that in itself creates something of a problem. So RSEs are formed, they're not taught generally. So certainly historically, what's happened in the past is that people have been taking part in a master's or in a PhD, They're usually in a domain, and they have to learn software engineering techniques to make their research work. And over time, they find that they actually quite enjoy working with the software, and then they start to focus more on that, and that's the path that takes them into the research software engineering. So they usually start off in the research, and then they add the software engineering afterwards. That's a fantastic way of forming people who both understand research and have a really broad understanding of software engineering, but it's not very quick and it's not a very efficient way to produce more people. What we need to start training people, and that's something that's just started to happen in the UK. When it comes to training RSEs, you then suddenly have this massive problem that's a really broad church. We've got RSEs embedded across all different fields of research. That means you get lots of different types of RSEs, different levels of understanding, using different tools, different techniques. So how can you provide training that covers all of this this broad range of skills that are necessary? Well, that's where this work comes in. So before I talk about the way that we're looking at skills, I want to move on to my next slide, which is a gorilla. And you might wonder why that's been brought up. And the reason is this. In academia, when we want strategic direction, what we tend to do is go to the experts, the people who've been around a long time, and we ask them what happens next. And that is a valid thing to do. But one of the problems is that these people, it's been a long time since they've been at the coalface doing the day-to-day work. So they forget about the smaller skills, and they tend to focus more on just the big strategic directions. The strategy is really important. We need to care that exascale is coming. We need to care that artificial intelligence, machine learning are really important, both commercially and to research. But we also need to care that lots of people don't have any command line experience, and that kind of gets overlooked. The reason I have a picture of a gorilla is that these people who have been around for a long time in research and have reached the heights and throw their might about quite a lot, we call silverbacks in the UK. So I didn't know if that chimed with you or not, but it's very important we talk to these experts, but it's also important that we talk to the people who are doing the day-to-day work. And that brings me up to a recent project that I'm involved in called Universe HPC. Forget about the HPC for now. It's HPC funded, but we're going to be looking across all research software engineering. And basically what we're doing is we're running a project to identify the skills that RSEs require, and then we're going to look at the training that's already in existence, work out which of those courses, which of those materials are effective, incorporate them into training courses, and where there are gaps, we're going to write those materials ourselves and commission other groups to write those materials. And the entire purpose of doing this is to produce a set of materials for continued professional development, so that people can learn research software engineering on the job, but also to put together a master's course for research software engineers. I'll come back to this project a bit later on, but for now, I'll direct you to the link at the bottom of there, and that's our survey on skills. It'd be really helpful if you were to fill that in. It's a very long link to write down. I'm sure you're feverishly writing away right now, but before you do that, I will share these slides at the end and you can just copy it from there. So that's the activity that's going on at the moment, to understand the skills requirement and then to provide training to meet it. But we also have the International RSE Survey. Now, one of the problems of being in RSE since its very beginning is you pick up certain jobs that you thought you would do once in 2016, but you're still doing now in 2022. And for me, that is running the RSE Survey. So this is an international survey, goes out across all the national associations. We try to run it every 2 years, but this last one has been postponed by COVID, unfortunately. And as I say, the results come out tomorrow. In this survey, we ask lots of different questions, but the one that matters here is that near the end, we ask, what are the 3 skills that you would like to acquire or improve to help your work as a research software engineer, stroke research software developer? That's for the benefit of the Canadians who can't call themselves research software engineers because they can't use the word engineer unless you've got a particular exam. And the skills can be technical and non-technical. So I've used this data to do some analysis, to look at what skills the RSEs are requesting themselves. And that's what I'm going to present next. So here we have the analysis of RSE skills. And I need to start off by talking about the joys of free text responses in surveys. So I'm a physicist, a laser physicist originally, and I find myself doing a lot of social science, and things like running surveys are an exciting addition to the portfolio of skills that a physicist generally has, because you're not taught how to do it. And one of the things I learned very early on is that when it comes to free text responses and surveys, you should use them in the same way that doctors use emetics. That is, only when you're prepared to clean up the mess. They are incredibly subjective when it comes to analyzing free text responses, and that's because it relies on my own views on things, my prejudices, but it also relies on the ways that people can write anything they want. To give you an example, on this skills question, the longest response was 388 characters, which is a short essay, and the shortest was 3 characters, HPC. So we've got a broad range. We've also got people who listened to the let's comma separate these different skills, so I know what each individual one is, and people who didn't take that advice on board and just wrote broad swathes of different information. And then it falls to me, obviously, to categorize all of this. It's quite difficult to do, and the method that I've adopted over the years is I start off in Google Sheets, so I just list all of the skills down the left-hand column, and then I start creating categories as things come up. That's my first pass, and that's what I'm going to be presenting today. And then I'll re-engineer it all in Python, because by the time I've been through it once in the Google Sheets, I know what search terms, what keywords I'm looking for to identify these different categories. If you're interested in looking at the results as they stand now, there's also a link to them in the bottom of the page. So the other thing about free text responses is people just say funny stuff. So what skills do you require? Not applicable. I have all the skills, that sort of stuff. People talk about things that you're not quite sure whether they're joking or not. So the need to negotiate for jobs in a discipline that doesn't value software. I didn't take that as a joke. I put that under the negotiation persuasion skill. People just complain about life. I'd like a new back. Mine is stiff. And then they talk about research truisms, things like how to herd cats. I mean, researchers. These are very important skills for RSEs, but I often have to overlook them when it comes to do the analysis. You might think it would be annoying to have this kind of stuff in surveys, but once you controlled your way through 1,300 individual free text responses, you do start enjoying these little interruptions. Right, well, so let's get to the analysis in that case. So I looked only at the English language responses because I don't speak French, German, or Spanish, which are the other 3 languages that the survey is available in. So that gave me 987 responses to review, and there were I created 95 different skills categories based on that. As you can see on the screen, there's all of the responses plotted out. And the first thing you'll notice is that, yes, there is a peak at the left-hand side, but there's a very long tail on this data. And we always see this when we ask for skills because, as I was saying earlier on, research software engineering is an incredibly broad church. So there's people have a broad range of different things, different skills they want to acquire. For each of these skills, there is the specific skill, and then I've also put them into a category, a broader category. So we can look at those next. So the categories are technical skills, management, languages, packages, and libraries, which I've kind of clubbed together. Soft skills, so the skills that basically things like communication, and then domains and fields. And as you'll see, the majority of responses is technical skills, and that's to be expected within research software engineering. But the first time we did this, I think we were all a bit surprised that the management came up so high on the list of skills that people wanted to acquire. I kind of feel that maybe research software engineers have been mainly focusing on the technical skills they want to acquire, but the management is really high, as are software skills and the domain skills. And what I'll do in this next bit is I just want to step through each of these fields, and we can sort of see what's coming up near the top. So starting with the big one with technical skills, the majority of responses, better software development, better software engineering. So people in various different ways said they wanted to work on their software development or software engineering skills. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. The next top is always the second highest skill whenever we do this kind of analysis, and it's testing. I've still not been able to get to the bottom of why that is. So I think partially it's a psychological thing. I think you can always do more testing. You can always know more about testing, rather than people just not having any testing skills at all. I think they kind of feel that they want to build those skills, possibly because they're not getting as much time as they'd like to implement testing regimes over the software that they're developing. And then we quite quickly step into, you'll see there are various different technologies that come up in the technical skills. So we've got cloud, it's the highest of those sort of technologies, and things like HPC, GPU, which I generally club together with HPC, and containers all come really high up the list. So these are the kind of skills that people feel that they want, but haven't acquired yet. I'd like to point out that architecture and design comes up really high as well. So there's a lot of responses, and I find this when I talk to research software engineers in a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of people who feel like they don't have the software design sort of methodologies down. They want more experience and want more training in how to design software. They can produce something that works, they can produce something with tests, but they're never quite sure if they've architected it properly. So feel free to look through that list. The things that you kind of would expect to pop up there, like machine learning and AI, and they're all on that list. But I think also things like UI, UX, so user interface stuff, it comes up really high. It's often a skill that we find difficult to acquire into our group. And there's lots of other web development things. But let's move. As I say, I'll be sharing these slides so you can take a look through in more detail at your leisure. But let's look at the next category, which is management skills. And see right at the top, and this is again isn't a shock to us, it happens every time we do this analysis, project management takes up a significant number of the responses. So we have, I don't know how it is within your home countries, but certainly within the UK, project management is one of those skills that's quite difficult to acquire when you're working your way through a research career. You usually have to get some money to do it, and it's something that the university might host, but it will cost you. And then it's very difficult to understand which project management skills are important, which ones are kind of not necessary for the kind of work that you're doing. So I feel that almost everybody I speak to would like some more project management training. And then we get onto the sort of people management and leadership. So this is really, I think, more about running groups, running RSE groups or running research groups or sub-teams within those groups. Because whenever these skills are being talked about, it's usually being talked about, I don't know how to manage people, right? It's done that way around. Or they're talking about understanding how to lead a community or that sort of thing. And then time management, I think, would come high on absolutely anybody's list. The workloads within academia are really quite heavy. You always feel like you don't have enough time to do everything you need, and I think there's an optimistic bunch of people who think that maybe better time management would solve that problem rather than reducing their workloads. And again, just to pick out a few that I think are interesting here, there was a reasonable bunch of people saying that they wanted more work on requirements gathering, and that's the first time I'd seen that come up in these surveys. It's certainly something that I've heard talked about, but I've never seen it as a sort of skills requirement. And let me see the other thing, the licensing always comes quite low down the list. And I'm not sure whether that's because I would argue that licensing is one of the fundamental important things to learn about software, but I think it's too often overlooked. And I think that's what's happening here, rather than people just aren't interested in acquiring the skills. So those are the management skills. And on the next slide, we've got the languages, packages, and libraries that people were interested in acquiring. And this is where we can sort of end some debates. So what do you want to learn? Python or R? Well, RSEs are quite strongly saying Python here, although R comes very high up the list as well. Just upset half the room there. I realized I've done that. But Python's the top language that people are looking for currently. And then before we get into other languages, Git comes up as a second position. I will note that many of the people here are saying about improving their Git skills rather than just saying learning them. So I think Git is one of those things that you can get to grips with, you can be using in a production context, but it can do a lot more, and it can make your life more simple in the future if you'd have some more training, and that's generally what people are asking for. And then I think it's really interesting just to go through and see the languages that people are asking for. So you've got C++ next. Rust is much higher up this list than it's been in the past. Then we have people just saying, generally, I'd like to learn more languages, which I think is one of those things that happens to RSEs when you realize that you won't be able to just stick to your favorite language. You're always going to be called in to do various things. Then RC, Kubernetes is quite high, I guess, alongside the sort of high responses we saw for HPC earlier on. And then we get to sort of JavaScript and Julia and things like that. A really broad range of technologies here, but I think for me personally, that kind of mirrors the kind of work that we see come in into the RSE group. So I think that is sort of reflecting the kind of work this kind of skills that RSEs are being asked to acquire. Okay, so I've got two more categories to go through. Soft skills, I think, is really interesting. It's almost completely dominated by communication skills. So general communication, people wanting to learn how to write better, how to present better, and then followed up by persuasion and negotiation. And when these things are mentioned in the survey, they're almost always talked about in a context. So it's negotiating recognition or negotiating career development opportunities. It's some things along those lines. But I think it's really important to note how important persuasion and negotiation is and how difficult that is as a skill to teach. Certainly, I'd have no idea how to teach it myself. And it's the sort of thing that I think we need to go to some outside bodies to acquire that kind of training. And then we have pedagogy and community building skills along those lines. Then just on my last slide on this section, which is coming good. I realize I'm 25 minutes in, so I do want to provide a few concluding thoughts, but there was domains and fields come up a lot. So people ask for, I just wish I knew more maths, or I knew stats, or linear algebra, or something along those lines. And I see that happen quite frequently with RSEs who are, especially when they're working in a new domain and they are not au fait with the techniques and the methodologies used within that field. They want to learn more from the domain. And we see, data science, data analysis comes really high up, cybersecurity also. But I'm really interested by the second entry here, and that's again the highest it's been on this list, and that's the need for DevOps and sysadmin. I don't know what that says about the community, and I'm not even going to take a punt on this one, but I am interested in other people's thoughts about why DevOps and sysadmin is so high all of a sudden in this survey. And then people are asking for other fields. What I thought was quite interesting there was it's very specific, the kind of fields. We've got maths, but research in general, computer science, and then you've got the sort of geospatial GIS sort of field, and then bioinformatics. And that's it. There aren't any of the other many thousands of disciplines being represented. So I don't know whether RSEs feel as though these are the domains they lack, or these are the domains they work in, so they want to know more about it. I'm really interested in doing some further analysis on that one. So that is my whistle-stop tour of the skills that RSEs have been asking for. And I do want to come back to this question of how we provide these skills. So as I pointed out earlier on, historically RSEs have just learned on the job. So they've had to do the software engineering, they've learned through trial and error, and that is not an effective way to build a scalable career or workforce. So we do need to look into training. So there are masters available, some masters modules available at different universities. UCL is the one leading there. They were the first one to put a masters module together in RSE, and that is available online if you'd like to take a look. And there are things like intermediate software carpentry, which was developed by a couple of people in my group, and Alexandra Nanandich from Manchester. And these certainly they stopgap some of the sort of intermediate skills that are required for RSEs, but we need a whole heap more. So I personally think we need to start from undergraduate, and I think we should be talking about the RSE role at the undergraduate level so people know that they can follow that as a career. Then we need masters in RSE. We need modules that can be taught at masters and PhD level for people who are coming in and doing software engineering. And this comes back to this point that we train our undergraduates in the field, and then as soon as they start any kind of research, masters or PhD, we suddenly expect them to have acquired all software engineering knowledge overnight magically. That can't continue to happen. If we want more RSEs, we need to be putting these courses together. And there are, of course, other options too. So one thing that often comes up, secondments and placements, as I've spelled there, but placements is what I mean. With industry, it would be a useful way of picking up skills from industry and seeing how software engineering is taught to people who are working in the commercial side of things. And one of the other ideas that I think is really interesting would be to introduce more junior roles. So to have a junior RSE position, and then these people could join embedded RSEs in research groups or in RSE groups. And maybe they wouldn't have all the skills, but they would have some software engineering skills and we could bring them on. And once they had a sufficient level of skill, we could bring them on we could employ them as a full RSE. So it's basically an apprenticeship, is what I'm thinking here. That seems to fit the requirements of RSE quite well, in my opinion. I'm just going to come back to Universe HPC and talk about the role of it in this work. So I talked about this earlier on. It's only just launched. We don't even have a website. We are at the stage of collecting skills at the moment, so we can do our own analysis. But ultimately, what we will be doing with that is developing these training courses that will be available to anybody online, so that we can train more RSEs. One of the things we'll be doing there is when we identify gaps, we'll be pushing this out to the community and asking for people to come forward to develop materials if they have expertise in that area. This won't be a volunteer thing. We will be paying for these courses. So please do keep an eye on Universe HPC in the future. And when we start putting these calls out, we'd be really, really happy to hear from people who are interested in preparing materials for us. And whilst I'm talking about what you can do for us, then I would like to say that I would be really interested in anybody checking over my results, taking a look at the analysis I've conducted. I'm always interested. The only way of doing this subjective analysis less subjectively is to hear opinions from other people. If you have identified training that you think is really effective, then you should contact RSSE Africa, or indeed any of the national associations, and let them know so that they can spread the word. As I've already talked about, keeping eyes out for a request from Universe HPC for training, but I think the thing that you really could do to help with our lack of RSEs is that you could promote the RSE career to absolutely everybody you know, undergraduate, masters, and anybody else, because it's a fantastic career, and we need more people joining us. And with that, and with this rude interruption by my mobile, sorry, I will say thank you. And I've got the links to the slides just at the bottom of that slide there.
Thank you so much, Simon.